nothing.
We'll get started as the people join in. I'll start my welcoming remarks. I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone for taking part in something that's very, very different, but allowing us to stay connected in a way that's unique, but something that I think that we're going to see more and more of as we go forward. The whole idea about today is being able to keep in touch and to learn about what we actually do as members of the community, the building community within the Women in the Industry grouping. The idea here is to actually pretend we're sitting around a coffee table or a boardroom table or a kitchen table and really just share what our guest speaker does. Because though we know what sometimes people do in our industry, we may not really have an intricate detail as to what that job looks like. The idea is to possibly open our eyes to something different, to engage and to look at what they do in a different light and learn. And I just lost everybody. Hang on. Oh. What happened here? There we go. Sorry, technical difficulties. So as I will begin our morning session, the idea is to sit back, have a coffee, and we want you to engage and ask questions. And today I have the privilege of representing the We HBA We group and to introduce Terri Johns. Terri stands out in our development industry, not only because of the fact that she is a woman, but because she has turned her own success into a thriving small business. Early on, Terri set herself out on a mission to open the door to women by creating opportunities for her staff and colleagues to lend in important decision-making roles. Terri is the ultimate woman's cheerleader and in the importance of owning your own success. After graduating from Mohawk College, she started in the industry in the former city of Stony Creek's planning department. Her private career started by joining May Pryor and Associates in 1984, and then continued her education with night classes at Master University, graduating in 1994 with a Bachelor of Arts in Geography. She became a registered professional planner in 1996, and Terri continued her journey with Starwood Homes, where she spent 15 years overseeing their land and planning approvals and development projects throughout Southern Ontario. In September of 2014, Terri opened the doors to her own business, Terri Johns Consulting Group, to provide urban planning, design, and project management services to a diverse and growing client portfolio. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest speaker this morning, Terri Johns. Morning, Terri.
Thank you. Good morning. So I'm thrilled to be here this morning, and I want to say that's the last scripted read you're going to hear for the morning. This is going to be, it's an open conversation. Literally, there is no script. In terms of questions, please feel free to ask them as we're talking. I don't want this to be me talking for 43 minutes and questions for 2 minutes. Really not interested in having that kind of morning. So let's just sit back, have some coffee, tea, whatever you got in that mug, and let's have a conversation.
Excellent. So Terri, I know that over the years, I mean, you've had an amazing career as you've moved forward, but in a nutshell, and in a not a very large nutshell, but in a nutshell, when a client comes to you with a piece of property and says, I want to do this, or I want to do that, what's the first step that you would take with them?
Well, the first thing we do, and this is not the most exciting part, is we actually go to the city's planning documents and we check. And that's called an official plan and a zoning bylaw. And generally, those set out what the city is expecting to see in terms of land use for the property. And then we do the fun part. Then we come up with what we would call a concept plan. And that really is sitting with the client, having a conversation about what their vision is in terms of their product for that site. Sometimes they're tough conversations. They may have expectations that aren't necessarily going to work for that property, but it's a relationship. We work through it, And then we determine whether or not we need to change what those planning documents are saying for the property. That, in a nutshell, is what we do. And, you know, my team can always attest that I say the concept plan is the pretty part. Everybody loves to look at the drawings. What is the less exciting part are the written reports and all of that work that we have to do for city staff. But generally, that's what it is. It's a concept plan.
And before I go on to the next question that I have for Terri, if at anyone at any point, again, to Terri's point, this is about just sitting around asking questions. Please just raise your hand so that we can see who wants to ask the question. And as the moderator, I'll just say, hey, Terri, you know, Tina has a question for you. And then not putting you on the spot, Tina, but you better come up with a question, okay? Remember that you're all on mute just to drown out the back noises if we're, you know, working at home and have kids and dogs and birds and whatever. But here's my next question, Terri, for you. So what would be the next step be after you know what the client wants to build? So for example, if I come to you and say, I have this large parcel of land and I want to build townhomes, what would be the next step that you would take with your client?
So after we looked at the land use and what we envision would be an appropriate use of the property, which also includes the neighborhood context, we always look at what's surrounding it. The other side of land development is the technical side. And we always have to understand environmental, which we call what are the bugs and bunnies that have potential impacts on the property. Archaeological, which is about our history and understanding if there's anything on the site with that. We look at geotechnical, which goes to the engineering, the dirt, and what is that dirt composed of and whether or not it will hold buildings, because that will go to the price of building the houses. And we all know that the costs of development are always a part of the client's consideration. We would look at grading as it relates to the surrounding lands, because that again will go to the design with respect to how the roadways are going to work and how the houses are going to sit on the property. So it really is, it's a marriage, if you will, of the planning side of it in terms of land use with the technical side and those kind of considerations. So we always work on consultant teams. And for instance, we've got Kayam here today as at the engineering. I think I also saw Scott Llewellyn's office is represented. Hi guys. You know, one thing I can tell you for sure, planning is not a silo. We do not work by ourselves. We all work on teams with all the other consultants in order to bring the client's vision to life.
So I've always been curious, and I've heard little stories. I've always heard little stories over the years where people go to develop land and then they start the the archaeological component of it and find something, right? Sorry, I'm Italian. I speak with my hands. I'll sit on them. So I was curious if at any point across your career, have you ever come across anything like that held? Oh, I guess that's a yes. That held up the site or caused something to go haywire. I've heard about the elephant bones in Ancaster that someone thought were human bones years and years and years ago. But maybe you could share something along that line that occurred.
Yeah, for sure. We have a few. So as you said, I was at Starward for a number of years. When we started the Garth Trails project, I don't know if everybody's familiar with that. It was a very large property, and it consisted of a subdivision of about 80 single homes and an adult lifestyle community. And when we were working through the subdivision registration, which is prior to building roads, we have to register all of the property for the final land use. At that point in time, the process didn't make you do the archaeological up front. You did it as a condition of approval. Sure enough, over by the woodlot, we ran into a longhouse. They uncovered a longhouse, which, yeah, was significant. It went to a stage 4, which is the final stages. There's 4 stages in full. We were able to actually put that in a separate phase. So they allowed us to go on with the rest of the property so we could build Garth Street and start the single homes while we were clearing that stage 4 archaeological find. And what happens is they literally dig it up, catalog it, and it goes and sits in a warehouse that the ministry owns, and that's the last you see of it. And yeah, believe it or not, all of that work and all of that cost, and it goes and sits in a warehouse. But it is, it's tracked as part of our history.
So we had a long house in Ancaster off of Garth Street.
Yeah, at 20 Road in Garth, yes.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and Kitty Murray Woods, another site where I live. We actually had a find there right at Stonehenge and Kitty Murray Lane, right on the corner, that significantly increased the costs as well. We had to dig there. So it happens more often than you realize.
Goes to show how old our city really is, right? In this rent, in the GTA of Hamilton itself. So anybody have any questions for Terri as we go along here, or?
We got something in the chat here.
Okay, Robert?
Oh, and Kayam does too.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a question, Terri. You said, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You say you work in groups. I'm just curious how it's working during COVID, how you're working with your team at your office, how that's working, and what kind of processes, or like what you guys are doing in that regards.
Well, certainly this format is our life, virtual meetings. We, as Terri Johns, we went remotely very early. We were fortunate. We are, they convinced me about 3 years ago, we no longer have file cabinets of files. We have everything up in the cloud. Yeah. But lo and behold, it served us well, because we literally on March 16th picked everything up, and we all went home and started working, as did a lot of our consultant colleagues and our clients. We enjoyed it. We were figuring it out. Then we had enough of it.
Yeah.
And we started, it's understood we're working out of the office when we need to, mentally, when we actually need to have that routine. But there are still days that we are working at home as well. And I'm finding that's kind of the case for a lot of consultants and clients.
That's good you offer that. We do the same thing with our office.
Yeah.
People can work from home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
we understand they have young kids or whatever. Exactly. Or maybe you just can't make it in that day. Yeah.
And there's no longer, at the height of it, there was no longer set business hours. It was literally, you just need to get it done when you'd get it done. If you didn't have daycare, I know Diana's on the line, she was getting her work done at 10 and 11 o'clock at night. But we seem to be into a better routine now. It seems to be working.
I like that too, Terri. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, it's more task related. As long as you get your tasks done, you could work Saturday. You can work whenever works for your personal schedule.
We do miss the collaboration.
Yeah, me too.
We've all learned how to share drawings, and they're trying to get them interactive, that you can put notes and everything on them. But it's not the same as being around a boardroom table and having a plan on a table and having the conversation. But honestly, it's better than nothing. And we're working through it.
Naaman, you had a question for Terri. You're on mute.
There you go. Terri, my question was about the archaeological dig, and whether there's always an option to remove what you find and relocate it or store it, or if there's circumstances that mean you have to quarantine that area off and it's not developable.
So excellent question. There is an example of that. So Redeemer University, ran into issues when they were doing part of their residential. I forget how many years ago it was. It was when, before they built Kitty Murray Lane as part of that project, so they had to do archaeological. They ran into a significant potential fine and have since chose not to develop it. So right at the intersection, there's a roundabout at Kitty Murray and an entrance into Redeemer. There's a big mound hill that is not developed, and their intention is just to leave that as it is, because I understand the costs were too high. So the answer is yes, that does happen.
Excellent. Any other questions for Terri? Okay. Terri, when you're in your process, when is it that you go to the city? Like after you've met with your client, you've done your preliminary work, at what time within a project would you get the city involved?
So within the last, I would say 4 to 5 years, now the cities are actually working a little differently. And what they do is they have a system called a pre-consultation. So we have the ability to go in with the concept plan that I talked about, to put it on the table with all of the departments and agencies and get a first round of comments. And what that does is it helps us identify any of the red flags that we're going to have to deal with through the process. It also identifies for us any, or confirms rather, what planning approvals are required. So whether it's an official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, or just a site plan. And we get that back from the city in writing, as well as all of the comments, so that we can all understand what our terms of reference are, so to speak, for our reports and the applications that have to go back in. So that generally, it's about 8 weeks, 12 weeks to get all of that back. The team goes away and prepares all of the reports that are required, and then we would go back in with a complete application to the planning department. So it's become a really great process to have problem identify ahead of time, instead of putting all the applications in and then realizing we've missed something.
Would you say, Terri, that that from the beginning to the end, how long on average would that take for a, say a 50-unit subdivision?
Carla, do you mean from the time of full application?
Like from the beginning, from the time a customer comes to you, a client comes to you, to the time they can dig a hole. What's that timeline look like?
Gosh. So I'm laughing because there is no set answer. It really is. It could be anywhere from them walking in the door to shoveling the ground. If it's site plan only, it could be 18 months to 36 months. Honestly, there is no set answer. What I can say is, so if you have a plan that is close to representing what the city anticipated for that property, generally it's a shorter timeline, because it would be site plan approval only, which literally says confirms engineering on your roads, house placement for zoning, and what your elevations look like. If you have a plan that is further away from what the official plan or the zoning anticipated, it's going to be a longer timeline, and it's going to be more complicated in what the expectations are from all of the consultant team. So it's relative to how far away are you from what they anticipated on the property. And the other factor, which we all deal with, is the public. It's a dynamic process. The public are involved. We very much are responsible for consultation and understanding and dealing with those issues. And that is another layer that certainly impacts what those timelines are.
We have a question from Jacqueline. She would like to know what other levels of government that may be needed to be engaged in this process.
So generally speaking, the The provincial government is have downloaded a lot of their responsibilities to the local agencies, to conservation authorities. For instance, in Niagara, the region of Niagara sits in place of the province and oversees approvals for local municipalities. As opposed to, and I can say that the old days when you would actually get comments from ministries, that tends not to happen anymore. I would say save and accept when you have a significant environmental feature, and sometimes the federal government gets involved in terms of waterways and items like that. But generally, it is downloaded to the local areas to make those decisions. I hope that answers the question.
We have another question. What happens if you want to change the use of a property? So it's zoned for one thing, but the owner of the land wants to do something totally different. What does that look like?
So that is, it happens all of the time. So the official plan generally sets out, you know, is it residential, is it commercial, is it or employment, or is it institutional? And I'm going to assume there's no official plan amendment because you're in a residential area, you just happen to want townhouses instead of singles. So that in effect is a zoning bylaw change. So it's a little less onerous than an official plan amendment. But again, it is considered to be a significant change because you're wanting to do something that council didn't approve for that property. So zoning bylaw amendment, you would have to justify that housing product that you want to introduce is appropriate. And that would take into consideration, one of the first considerations would be the neighborhood and what is around it, right? And professional planning, we have a responsibility to protect the public interest, and that is to introduce something that is appropriate. And appropriate doesn't just go to what type of housing product, it also goes into what sort of yards are we creating, how many units are we putting in there, what is the height compared to the surrounding area. So all of that gets incorporated into a justification report that we write that also takes into consideration engineering, so servicing stormwater, elevation, urban design, and all of that. So it all has to be justified, and that's what gets circulated to the agencies, the departments in the neighborhood. And then it is that negotiation with planning staff if it's appropriate, and they would recommend it for approval. So
we've got a lot of questions coming up. This is fantastic. The other question I have is from Robert, and he wants to know if you've participated in virtual public meetings. Is that something that you've already done, and are we going to see more of that?
So it is being done. We've monitored a couple of them. One in particular was GSP. Brenda Case at GSP ran one. It went really well from what we saw. They used a facilitator that acted as that go-between between the consultant team and the public. We do have some coming up, so we're interested in knowing how that's going to go. I can also say the City of Hamilton has officially gone virtual with their planning committee and committee of adjustment. And we had an application on last July 7th for Hamilton Planning Committee. Caitlin is on. She said it went really well. We also have had a number of committee of adjustment that have gone well, and the public has been able to sign on and talk about their concerns. I think it is something very different. I think we're going to have to figure it out. My only concern is not everybody has access to this sort of platform. So we may have to figure out other ways to do this as well. And maybe old school letter writing and written comments in.
We've got another question from Carly. Are some cities easier to work with than others in your experience?
Okay, who's on here? Who can, what can I say? Yes. You know, we don't just, and I haven't in my career ever just worked in Hamilton. You know, I'm everywhere from Oakville, Cambridge, Haldeman, Niagara, all over. And the answer is yes. And generally, making generalization here, the smaller the community, the easier it is because it's less complicated. The bigger a community gets, the more complicated it gets, the more layers of comments there are. Generally, that's what it is. The other factor is it's a factor of council and how council works. Because whether we like it or not, we're driven by political decisions. So that has a lot to do with how well it goes as well. Good question. Good question.
So which cities should developers be going to that are easier? That would be part
Do that to me.
yeah. All that land and let's develop there.
Welland is the easiest one, and it happens to be where I grew up. So just
Robert, get all those builders and let's go to Welland. So the next question Carly has, I think it was Carly. Oh no, sorry, it wasn't. It was Jacqueline. I need to put my glasses on so I can see properly. What are some of the best ways that you have found to engage in public consultation during COVID? I mean, I understand that, I mean, there are a lot of challenges where, I mean, look at us here today. Like traditionally we would be in a room sitting around a table, maybe having a luncheon or whatever. What have you found that has worked for you, Terri, and your team?
So honestly, during COVID, I don't really have any answers other than what we've experienced with Hamilton and monitoring some of the calls that are going on. But I would like to say public consultation is actually one of my favorite parts of the job, believe it or not, except when I'm getting yelled at, but that's okay. There's a couple of things that I love to do, and we just did it with a project with a neighborhood association in the north end of Hamilton. And we had literally roundtable meetings with plans on the table and had conversations with them about plan development. And it was very engaging and a very positive approach. The other thing that I've done, and this is since I started Terri Johns Consulting, we're representing Chinook Hospital was closing, and we had to let the neighborhood know that there were going to be changes to the campus. So we actually prepared a newsletter, and we sent out 800 newsletters to the neighborhood. And it was very fulsome information about big picture wise what was going to be potentially happening. And I even put my contact name on it, and I got 3 phone calls. That was it out of 800 newsletters. But I still run into people that thank me for it when I've had other public meetings for other developments in that area. So it was a really good format to do that. And thirdly, one of the newer things that's being done are micro websites. So the ability to literally put up a website that people can email questions in on, but also share all of the reports and the drawings. So they're able to see what was put into the city. They can go through those and know what all the information is at their own timeline and at their own home, which is, I think, a really great way to share information as well.
Excellent. So we got another question. This one is from Tina. When does your role with the builder or the project end? So you're involved right from the beginning, which is fantastic. When do you say your goodbyes and say, okay, you're on your own now?
Easy one. When they go to submit for building permit. We have this hard line. We don't do building permit. It's our job to get them to the day before we say, you can put your building permit in. So generally that's what it is.
Oh, that's a nice hard line where you break it and you're on your own, go build your house or subdivision or whatever. Do you find that there's a difference in timelines between building single family homes versus maybe preparing a property for a condo building? Or are the timelines similar because some of the aspects are similar?
Honestly, in theory, the condo should be more straightforward. It just depends on what municipality it's in. Right now, Hamilton is facing some challenges on the subdivision side, taking longer to get traditional subdivisions with public roads through, which shouldn't be as hard, but they seem to be slowing down. Condo townhouse blocks are pretty straightforward generally. They do take a little less time.
So in your years of experience in doing all of this, and during your consultation with the public, have you ever come across a situation where you want to shake your head and can't wrap your head around some of the things that come up? I see a couple people smiling and laughing because I'm sure that it happens. But I am curious as to, one, how do you deal with that? And two, you know, what happens like behind the scenes, right? Because as I come in to buy a house from a builder and I'm buying my home and I'm getting my keys and you guys, you know, we put all these pieces together and that's great. But what happens when you get a group of people who say, not in my backyard, right?
So certainly I have learned over the years. So when I was with May Perry in Burlington, we had a project just off Again Street, and we were introducing semis in a neighborhood that had singles, and these were the days that was just unheard of. And to be clear, really nice semis. Right? They were lovely. So I made the mistake. I'm in a church basement with the neighbors, and I said that I lived in Hamilton, and which was a huge mistake, because then they literally came after me like a lynch mob because I was bringing Hamilton development to Burlington. So lesson learned: you do not share any personal information with the public. What I can say is it gets emotional. It is emotional for people. It literally is their backyard, and they just have a hard time accepting that there are certain rights in land use planning, and accepting that, you know, same to same, so single to single isn't the only thing that's appropriate. So the trick is not to take it personally. You become, for lack of a better word, an actor, and you're representing the client, and you just are calm, cool, and collected until they all go home, and you go home, and then you deal with the comments that you really want to say. But you know, not to minimize it, it's a big deal for them, and it needs to be taken seriously. They need to see that you're recognizing what their issues are, and we do our best to address them, but we can't always address them all.
Okay. Got another question from Robert. You have lots of experience volunteering on several different boards, and can you share your thoughts on this, and how has this contributed to further successes within the planning that you participate in, if any?
You know what, that's a thought provoker. Okay, I would say, honestly, I think it makes me more aware of the community. So I'm, you know, a Hamiltonian at heart, and the work, I'm on the Home Builders Board, which is a great experience in terms of learning what everybody does and getting to know all of the ins and outs of the association. But I also am, and I know I harp on this so much, YWCA Hamilton, the vice president and the chair of the building committee. And I have my YWCA, just happen to have that mug today. So I am, you know, excited. We're building Ottawa Street, and I've been running that project for a number of years. And I would say the learn out of that is when I said to you, I have a hard line at building permit. Well, I didn't on this one, and I actually had to do all of the development construction budget and oversee it of a $23 million build. I had to sit at the table with construction managers and figure it all out in terms of the building. So that really has given me that other layer of experience that I wouldn't typically have got. But it also it shows the importance of the whole community and understanding what their needs are. And I think when I'm out talking to the public, I think that they have that trust with me because they know that that's there in me. So I think it has been helpful. Really good one.
Do we have any other questions from anyone on the group this morning? I can't see any hands because, oh, we do. Carly, you want to unmute and just ask your question?
Terri, what's your favorite part of your job? Aside, I mean, I know you said, what's your favorite part?
Honestly, leading my team. Working with the public and the design, my roots. I started at the drafting board with T-squares and set squares, designing subdivisions and townhouse blocks, and I've loved with Terri Johns going back to those roots. And even though they use their AutoCAD, we have 3 AutoCAD stations. I am still tracing paper and drive them nuts, and I love that old school the design part of it too.
One more question. You've been doing this a long time. You've been part of a lot of communities and like being planning of them and stuff, and now driving around and seeing them all up and working and people living in them. How does that feel?
Awesome. And I live in one, so it's a great feel, right? It is. Yeah. Enough for the old though. Too much of that.
Is that Terri?
I'm vintage. Lots of different years. No.
Well, you're not the only one. I've been around for 30 years, Terri, and counting. So, and I guess when you love what you do, as you can see it, it's a passion for you. Getting up in the morning is not a job, it's a passion, right? Which you just naturally excel at. And that's one of the things that through this committee that we have in this group is when we start doing this type of session for the younger generation, because our goal is to look at young girls and getting them into the construction industry. One of the messages that needs to be shared is look at alternatives, but find something you love to do. Because when you love what you do and you get up in the morning and you go to it, it's not a job, it's a passion. And that passion is what drives you naturally. And I think that if we could all just share some of that with our younger groups, I think it'll make a big difference. And again, we've come together to support each other, to encourage each other, to promote each other. But we also need to remember that when we're around younger girls, no disrespect to the men in this group this morning, but to show them that there is an amazing, amazing possibility to participate in an industry that can open so many different doors. And I'm excited about sharing that with the younger generation and getting them involved, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a landscaper or an architect or a plumber or electrician or a carpenter or a tile layer, because the reality is when the builders build homes, it's not one person building them, it's a community building it. And homes are where we live, it's where we share our lives with our partners, with our family, with our kids, with our pets, and it's where we create all the memories, right? So it's really important that we get this message across to the younger generation that this is an amazing industry to work in. For myself, 30 years of it and loving every day still, right? So want to be able to make sure that that is instilled to our younger group. So this morning, I think it went really, really well. Again, we wanted to keep it to 45 minutes because everybody's got a busy day. So I want to thank Terri Johns from Terri Johns Land Consulting, President. So proud of you, Terri, as we all are. And I just want to remind everyone that we've got Carly Campbell coming up, Vice President of Starward Homes. She'll be speaking to, I need my glasses again, I'm buying a new home and where should I spend my money? Extremely important. That will take place on July 21st. On July 28th, we'll have Danny Gabriel, Project Manager of Mars Homes, speaking to sales and marketing. And then on August 4th, we'll have production and construction, Natasha Paitkin, Marketing Director of New Horizon Homes. And I am, oh, wait a minute. I got another question for you, Terry. Hang on here. When is it best in the process to do a condo conversion at the front end, put in, or does it matter? And have you had experience with this?
So I have done condo conversions. I understand that part of the question. Let me answer that first. Condo conversions, I did a condo conversion of a couple of older projects in Hamilton in the East End. It was a tough process because they all had to be site plan approved and brought up to current standards. So that was a little bit of a struggle on physically on the site. Condo conversions often are difficult because the municipality will have in their policy documents rules about vacancy rates. So you can't assume as of right on converting to condos. So sometimes it becomes a policy application when you weren't really anticipating that it would be. But I'm sorry, I didn't understand about early in the process. Let me just see if I can read this.
Jacqueline, maybe you could elaborate on your question if you're on mute. Just go off mute.
Hi, Terry. It's Jackie Asada. I'm with Habitat for Humanity, Hope, Mississauga. Thank you today. I've found this very interesting and first time joining the group. So it's a great group and I can definitely see learnings from these kinds of Zoom meetings. What we were just trying to figure out is we're doing some townhouses in Halton region, and we're just trying to figure out if we should be having those conversations in the beginning with the region and the municipalities we're working in, or if this is something we could do in terms of, let's say 20 years down the road, we want to flip into, I can see you shaking your head.
Yeah. Okay, I get it. Do not leave it. Deal with it now.
Okay.
If you want to have an offline conversation, reach out. I'm happy to give you some advice.
Thanks. Appreciate that. We are working with SV a little bit on this, so
just as a association member, I'm just happy to help you on. But the answer is don't leave it. It's hard to convert after. If your intent is to create them as condos and you can still rent them or whatever you're going to do, do it. And I see Kathy's on the phone. I don't know if you agree with that, but don't leave it. Create your process now.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been fantastic. And if you have any input or any feedback, please send it to Cindy at the Home Builders. I want to say thank you to Terry for taking the time this morning to tell us a little bit about what you do and all of the things that cross your desk. And I'm going to ask everybody to hold up their mug to their camera. So Terry, I'm not sure if Terry can see all of the mugs. Cindy? Not sure.
Yeah.
Terry,
Rob, I don't think. No.
I'm not going to put my mug up. I donated the gift card today for our event. Terry, with all of the mugs that I hope she can see.
It's hard to see them.
Bring them really close, folks, like right up. Woo! Yours is awesome. Robert. It doesn't have anything on it.
I said, Rob.
All right. I don't know if Terry, can you confirm?
I have the worst one.
I'm partial to Sarah Knowles' mug because it's our Professional Planning Institute, I believe. I saw. Yeah, well done there, Sarah. I think we're going to have to go that way.
Okay, all right then. So we'll make arrangements for the winner to have her gift card picked up at the Home Builders event. Yay!
Hey.
I just want to say thank you. This has been great. I look forward to the next round. I learned quite a bit this morning, Terry, so thank you very much. And everyone, stay safe, stay cool, have fun, and get into a little bit of trouble.
Thank you, everyone. That was
Great day,
great.
everyone.
Great job. Excellent.
Hey, have a
See you
great
later.
day.
Bye-bye.